A very good evening to you all. Thank you, Dr. Anil Arora, for that very warm introduction, and also for inviting us to present once more on your platform, this time on the prestigious Dentoscope platform, which we have seen in the past few months. You have been putting up some really fabulous webinars, which has really enriched everybody, from all walks, all fields of dentistry, and we are richer by the experience. Thank you so much, Dr. Arora. It is wonderful to be here and sharing with you a much discussed topic of cement and screw retained implant crowns. So, we always look up to the pioneers of implant dentistry, Dr. Brånemark, Dr. Leonard Linkow, Dr. Hill Tatum, Dr. Graufelman. And this is the famous slide that showed you that osseointegration was a reality. Look at all the way the bone cells are joining in with the implant. So the initial days of implantology, I must tell you to the younger generation who are here, the initial days of implantology was spent becoming very excited about this wonderful new phenomenon where the implant and the bone got osseointegrated. We were excited and we were waiting for that to happen. We were focused at that time on seeing if there's going to be, whether we are going to be able to do it. We put the implant and we were so excited when osseointegration did take place. So that concept of osseointegration, that was a resounding success. We know that the bone cells get attached to the bone itself, gets attached to the implant almost all the time. But we also realized that to deliver the teeth that the patients wanted, they didn't come for implants, they wanted teeth. So to deliver the teeth that patients wanted, we needed to understand the fundamental difference between teeth and implants. So essentially, what is the fundamental difference? It was all about the periodontal ligament. We were always making fun and saying the periodontal ligament belonged to the periodontist and we need not understand it much and it was not necessary. But somehow now the periodontal ligament has become so vitally important in implantology that is why sometimes you hear periodontists say that we can do implants much better than everybody else. And it's a fact. If you look, the teeth are in the bone, right? But the way they are in the bone, they are suspended in the periodontal ligament, and which holds the tooth to the bone. Whereas an implant is just fused with the bone. There are no periodontal ligament fibers. And that is a very, very important difference, because when we look at teeth and implant side by side, we are now looking at how long can we promise our patient that his implant is going to last. Are we talking about the same thing here? The tooth is suspended in a periodontal ligament attaching to the bone. The implant is attached to the bone. But can we look the patient in the eye and say, when the patient asks us, Doc, how long will these implants last? Can I say without a doubt that it lasts forever? Meet this gentleman. We completed a full fixed prosthesis on him. Things look very good. But can I safely tell my friend here that things are going to last forever with this implant? A few years later, look at this, crestal bone loss. It looks you in the eye, even though the patient is very comfortable. And I'm also looking at some few implant threads showing. Then I start to realize that all the things in the implant world are not as rosy as the company and the marketing would make you believe. What could have gone wrong? I did everything right. The system, the technique, the tissue response, the implant itself is all very disappointing, because he didn't know he was going to get pain. And how come he didn't know? He didn't know he was having any pain. He was not uncomfortable. He didn't report the way a patient reports to us in our practice when they have pain. So, when a patient walks into your office, what do you see? You see him, if he's got pulpitis or an abscess or a periodontal abscess, anything of that, they look quite different than a patient who walks in with implant-related pain. And we never see a patient with implant-related pain looking like the way you see in this picture. At the best, what will they say? They say, my mouth it's a little sore. I'm not able to bite. I have a little bad taste in the mouth. Or they may notice a small little boil over the gum, but nothing great, nothing terribly painful, not like pulpitis pain or an alveolar abscess pain, for instance. So what is the reason for this? The reason actually for this is actually called the proprioception around a natural tooth with this periodontal ligament is actually quite different from osseoperception. The osseoperception around an implant in embedded bone. The latter is very sensitive, is less sensitive to pain stimuli. Like for instance, the tooth is very sensitive because of the periodontal fibers. The sensitivity is much higher. They are much more responsive to pain stimuli or bacterial infection, even though the tooth is more vulnerable. But around an implant, or the bacteria can enter, anything can happen, the bone loss can take place, but the patient will never be aware to that extent that something is going on, something very wrong is going on. So we have to remember also another thing, that the implant has very little movement. Barely 3 to 5 micrometers moves, whereas the tooth moves about 30 microns. This seems to be one of the main reasons why we don't connect teeth and implants. This is extremely important in how the occlusion is developed because of the differential of the forces that exist between teeth and implants. So also talk about probing depths. When you probe around a natural tooth, you feel resistance from the thick periodontal fibers, you feel the resistance from the connective tissue. And these probing depths are much more in dental implants because the junctional epithelium is not as strong as what is found in a tooth. So what would be considered pathologic for a tooth, 4 to 5 millimeter pocket in a tooth is pathologic. This is considered normal in an implant. What about keratinized tissue? So we used to keratinized tissue actually plays now such a huge role in implant dentistry, which I'm able to realize after so many years of practice. And now I'm far more nervous about the situation on the right when compared to the situation on the left. Because for teeth, of course, keratinized tissue is important, but it's not as much as it is in implants. We now know that when there is a lack of keratinized tissue around an implant, there will be failures down the road. And we are wondering how to solve those problems. Then, to tell you a little bit of history, things became very much simplified with the introduction of the Brånemark Serra 1. It was the abutment that started it all when it came to cementable implant dentistry. The abutment itself was screw retained and the crown was cemented on top of it. Suddenly, the complexities of implant dentistry was not so insurmountable because we could just make an impression of an abutment in the mouth. We could pretend that this was a tooth and now you have a crown. So today a whole range of abutments are available. The all-in-one solution, you can choose a CAD-CAM or you can choose a zirconia milled abutments. You are spoiled for choice. They are nowadays far more accurate in terms of fit because of digital technology. And look at that. It's all so simple. I really love that the fabrication of a cement retained crown was the same as crown and bridge. All you have to do is you take a fixture level or abutment level impression using an impression coping. Then you place the abutment. You prepare the abutment according to how you want to make a coping. Then you wax up the ideal coping in the laboratory fit over the abutment. You cast the coping, you ceramize it, and then you cementation of crown over the retained abutment. So wonderful. I felt so good doing all this wonderful work. And what did it bring to me at the end of the time? In our full arch cases, the occlusal table of my large implant cases was the same as that of crown and bridge. It looked quite the same. Uninterrupted terrain, properly the correct amount of ceramics. I had full control over the occlusal contacts in excursions and in centric contacts. Therefore, the occlusion could be developed perfectly because there were no screw access holes or areas of interrupted ceramic that would be liable to chip later. So all these movements, dear friends, were all under great control. So this entire case like this could be completed just pretending that all these were teeth. Life couldn't be simpler, right? And we did so in many, many cases like these. Implants for the full arch, custom abutments, and cemented the whole arch. And so we had happy stories. Our story was happy. The patients also were very happy. And we have had so many happy patients who have stayed happy over the years. That's a lot of happiness. Call it a successful outcome that brought happiness to all.
So Dr. Acharya, thank you for sharing that perspective on the cement retained crowns. I would like to define success. You use the word success. So, there are a couple of different types of success, right? You can have academic success. You can be a scholar and you can do really well in your studies and you have academic success. You could have financial success. You could make a lot of money, you could earn, and that's financial success. Or you can have some very high career-oriented goals and then you can achieve your career-oriented success. But for me, strongly, if someone is relying only on cemented crowns all the time, then they're relying on something called geographic success. And what is geographic success? That is when your patient leaves the country after the treatment, or you leave the country after the treatment and you never see each other again. And the reason for that is this particular case, which you just showed, which is on custom abutments, which is a cementable case. Every couple of, maybe every year or so, this guy comes in and one of his cement retained bridges has now worked loose. And then I know I need to cancel my schedule for the rest of the day because I'm going to be spending a lot of time taking out my best friends in the clinic, which is the screw, the crown and the bridge removing tools and the GC plier. And I'm going to be wrestling with that bridge to try and get it out. So not particularly easy with these cement retained restorations. And I know that in terms of history, a lot of dentists started with cement retained because it was very similar to simple crown and bridge. But the reality is actually implant dentistry on endosseous implants started with screw retain. And they were these type of designs where you would have 5 or 6 implants between the foramen and you would have a sort of high and dry design, which is very, very typical with a cantilever. These were the original designs. Then things revolutionized for the screw retain scene with the famous UCLA abutment, and this same abutment can be used to make a screw retain crown, or you could do a custom abutment and do a cement retain crown with this particular tool. And you have temporary abutments now, you have titanium cylinders, these are all screw retained, of course. The process is a little bit different than what you said. You would seat your fixture level impression. You would then send this to the lab fabricates a model. And on that model, they wax it up on a UCLA abutment. They do a casting and finally add ceramic. So it's a one-piece screw with ceramic on top of it, ready to go. And you just need to close that access hole and there's no cement to worry about. Because why do we worry about cement? Because cement washout can be up to 10%. This was a paper in 1996 and there's a rate of close to 10%. That means 1 in every 10 patients is going to have cement washout. And that's going to come out. And then a worse problem is this is abutment screw loosening. For this gentleman, the cement actually did not wash out. So it was still stuck in his mouth, but the whole thing was moving. So we had to drill an access hole and convert a cement retained bridge into a screw retained bridge, which is again a lot of work. You want to make sure you're getting the exact point so that you can access the screw. What if you're in the wrong place? Then you just drill through a lot of metal and wasted a lot of burrs. And the patient's not happy and you're going to be pretty miserable too. For immediate loading, you definitely need to do screw retain because you do not want in all that open tissue, which is bleeding, it's hard to visualize, you do not want cement getting in the way because that can cause some real issues. And when you have less interocclusal clearance, this is a big indication for screw retain because when you have less space, and you're trying to do a cement retain, you're going to have a very tiny abutment, and that very tiny abutment is not going to be able to hold the crown. But if you were doing a screw retain situation, you could, and even up to 5 millimeters, you could do a crown which is held in by a screw, and that's going to work really well compared to a cement retain crown in this situation.
However, Dr. Varun, the screw retain crown is not without its issues. Take this full arch case, for example. When you have the screw access hole occupying sometimes up to 50% of the occlusal table, how do you maintain stable contacts over time? We know that the composite over the access hole will wear faster than the porcelain. You lose a little bit of control. because one does not want occlusal contacts over composite. And then what about the issue of ceramic integrity, Dr. Varun? We also know that lab studies show that ceramic integrity is a big issue. The Instron machine is used to test this integrity. The testing machine is used to load the crown till the ceramic fails. A cement retained crown has far more ceramic integrity than a screw retained crown, which actually fractures much, much faster. Have a look at this table. So this is a screw. The first two columns are the screw retained crowns, where the screw is, one is in the center of the crown and one is about 1 millimeter offset buccally. And the other two groups, which is marked in blue, are the cement retained crowns, where there is where it's a 5 millimeter occlusal table and a 4 millimeter occlusal table. And if you look at this, you will see, look at the fracture resistance. It is amazing to see the difference. You can see that the screw retained group, the ceramic fractures at 95 to 108, whereas in the cement retained group, it fractures at 400. Isn't that a big difference? So in a similar study, where this is a group 1, where the access hole is right in the middle of the occlusal table. The group 2, the access hole is placed a little bit buccally, 1 millimeter to the buccal. Group 3 is a completely cement retained crown. And group 4 is a screw mentable crown, which we will talk about a bit later. But if you look at the fracture resistance and look at the graph, you can see that the fracture resistance of group 3, where the cemented crown, it is the highest fracture resistance. So I'm really impressed with the cement retained crowns that way, for what they are in terms of strength, ceramic integrity, and so on. And of course, you know, I know that you can place crowns, you can place a crown with 5 millimeter interocclusal clearance, and sometimes it's clearly indicated. But to also gently bring it to your notice about the type of patients we sometimes have. And you make this screw retained crown, and it ends up looking very ugly. The interocclusal space is too little for you to accommodate enough amount of ceramic to give a proper anatomy and contour. And sometimes we end up with quite sort of irritated patients who don't like what they see.
So I like that you brought up those lab studies, and those lab studies which you spoke about really went to the maximum level. You have an Instron machine which is trying to break ceramic, and the thing breaks at 3,000 newtons, 4,000 newtons, some really unrealistic values. But if you look at human beings, like men can generate up close to about 600 newtons and women can generate about maybe 450 newtons. And that's the maximum bite force. Who cares if something breaks at 2,000 or 3,000 newtons? It's much more than physiologically what is possible. And if, let's talk about the elephant in the room, the thing which everyone is thinking about is the cement. And the cement causes something called peri-implantitis. And you can look at these examples in this first picture. You can see that there is mesially and distally, you can see that there's cement. But maybe this one is fine, right? Look, there's no cement at all. It looks really clean. So are we doing good? No, because you do not see cement which is retained on the labial or on the lingual. So that's an important consideration to remember. And the bacteria, all of our worst enemies from typical perio lesions, Prevotella, P. gingivalis, Spirochetes, Fusobacterium, they all make a reappearance when it comes to peri-implantitis. And we need to define what this is. There's peri-implant disease, there's mucositis, and there's peri-implantitis. So there is inflammation, then there's inflammation of the mucosa with no bone loss. And when you have peri-implantitis, that's really bone loss as well. So if you're saying my patient has peri-implantitis, then that means your patient has lost bone as well. And the effects of this can be really quite terrible. They can see how much of cement is stuck there, which has caused a huge issue. This was an interesting study. They had 39 patients and they had 42 implants, and they were all cementable cases. And they went in and with an endoscope, and they showed that 34 out of 42 implants had cement via the endoscopy. So what did they do? They looked at how long before the implant was placed, and the implant was placed in some cases even 10 years ago. So someone had an implant placed in 1990, 2000, they developed peri-implantitis, and then they went in and discovered that it was because of a huge chunk of cement which was still lying there. And if you look at the plaque index and if you look at the bleeding index, it's no comparison. Like in plaque index, it's 4 times more in a cementable case and significantly more with the bleeding index in a cementable case compared to a screw retained case as well. This lady who I delivered a crown a few years ago, the margin is quite deep because we didn't want to keep the margin too superficial. We were afraid of any show through, and I cement it, and I go in digging with my instrument to clear out all the cement. I don't know if I've done a good job. The X-ray says that I'm clear, but who knows? I may have trapped some cement on the labial or on the buccal, on the labial or the lingual. We never really know, and that's the problem with these restorations. So this was an interesting study as well. They have an implant analog in the model, and they've made different heights, different collar heights of these cementable cases. The interesting thing they did over here was they actually did a cementable crown which has an access hole in the back so that you can fit in a screwdriver. So what they did was they took these 5 abutments, placed it on the analog, filled the crown with cement, seated it, and then finally retrieved with the screwdriver on the back. And then they measured the amount of cement which remained, and they weighed it and they visualized it. And always, the deeper you went, meaning the more subgingival your margin is, the bigger problem you're going to have with the quantity of cement and the weight of cement, and visually how much the cement appears to be.
So I admit, that though the cemented crowns look very attractive and they have got high fracture resistance, the biggest problem and why people moved away from cement retained crowns, cemented crowns, was it was a fact that the cement was constantly getting pushed in, and like he said, after so many years you might encounter a problem. So people have been constantly grappling with the problem, and one such solution to the problem came up when Dr. Wadhwani, he presented this paper, because the problem of the cement getting pushed deep inside and around has been solved. One way is to change the cementation method to minimize extrusion into the sulcus. The problem is when you cement it, the cement should not get into the sulcus and stay there indefinitely. So what was done was, the crown is lined on the intaglio with Teflon PTFE, the plumber's tape which we use, and a bite resistation paste is flowed into the crown with a little handle for hold. So the thickness of the Teflon is about 30 microns, 20 to 30 microns, and that much space is left over. The bite resistation paste flows into the crown with a little handle for hold. After setting, this material is removed along with the Teflon, and now the crown is filled with cement. The plug is reinserted. The excess cement which flows out can be cleaned away, and now the crown is lined with the cement of choice and reseated back on the model. This is to be removed before the cement sets, and then the crown is cemented onto the abutment. There should be, in this case, very little excess cement. So this is a kind of ingenious method. One needs a little patience, but after all, we are looking for a good result for a long term, which is how to get rid of that cement which is getting pushed beyond the sulcus. The other way, which there's a paper by Hess, who said that we can take a Teflon, the same Teflon which we were talking about, the PTFE, and it can be stretched around the base of the abutment with a twist on the buccal. And once you do that, then you can seat this abutment with no Teflon over the abutment margins. You have to be very careful when you seat the abutment. The Teflon only surrounds the base. So it is seated over the abutment margins. You seat the crown, remove the excess cement, remove the tape, and then it can be remove the tape, and now you can see it's very clean and no cement has a possibility of getting in, because the Teflon is now going to block the movement of the cement apically. So this can be used for many implant designs. So this is also a good way. And then we have to keep being ingenious in these matters, but also, Dr. Varun, something we alluded to earlier, where you have to convert a cement retained crown to a screw retained crown in case the abutment screw is loose and the cement has not yet washed out. So what do? One good way is to actually, the X-ray, you can take an X-ray and kind of make a kind of wide guess as to where that actually the screw is lying. You can see it in a mesiodistal view and not on the buccolingual view. I accept that, but you'll have a kind of idea where it might most probably be, and maybe you don't have to drill out too much of the tooth to get access, too much of the crown to get access to the screw which you are planning to actually locate, and then convert this to a screw retained crown in the future. Then there's, of course, a much simplified method, but all these things require a lot of planning. One way is to, once the restoration is complete, what do? You seat it on the model. Then you make a duplicate, as in the right, and do a vacuform. Once that is done, you seat guide pins onto the implant analogs. You have done that. You can punch holes into the vacuform and store it in the patient records. So if and when, God forbid, he comes back, when he comes back and you are now trying to find out where is the screw located, you can easily find out, because now you have this vacuform with the holes directing you to where you should be going for these, where you to find the screws. So this is a kind of simple method. The other is, if you own an intraoral scanner, that can be used to scan the model with the abutment. And then you can use an indicator pin or a guide pin for that scan. Then you make a second scan, which is taken with this final crown in position. You superimpose the two and keep it in the patient's file. That's a forever record of where the screw is positioned, in case you need it. Another manual way, which requires a little bit of planning, is something in the laboratory called a slotted screw, a slotted screwdriver, that is. So what it does is, we tell the lab technician in advance to make a little notch on the lingual of the crown. When you do the wax up itself, the notch has to be there. So when it is cast, you can see there will be a notch appearing in the crown. So this notch will exactly fit, the slotted screwdriver will exactly fit into this notch in case you want to remove the crown. And with a little twist with the physio dispenser to irrigate a bit, you can just twist the crown out. So sounds a little, but if with planning, this is a very nice system. It really works very well. Another way of doing this is to mark 3 dots on the teeth, on the cast, on either side for orientation. You put abutments into place. Then you take a photo. Do not change the settings or the position of the camera or the model. In the same angle, you have to place the crown on top and take a second photo. Now you can go to PowerPoint, which all of you are very familiar with, and you go to the transparency settings and play around with it a bit till it becomes transparent. And now you can see very clearly the position of the screw on the image. So that's sort of also simple. So these are different ways of trying to retrieve crowns easily if they have to be taken out. I mean, removing crowns if they have to be taken out for whatever reason.
Yeah, I think one of the things also, besides retrieving problematic cemented crowns, I think also the cementation itself can be improved. So this study showed, if you have a custom abutment like this or a stock abutment, should you be filling this wall up to the very end with composite, or should you just fill up the base so that the screw doesn't get jammed with cement? And the results of the study showed that the retention was better in group B, where they were having better retention without filling up the entire wall all the way up to the height. And that may be because there's more surface area for the cementation to take place. And this is something which, we have to control our labs. If they have the habit of cutting over this entire wall over here, that's a problem. You do not want that to happen, because that again drastically reduces the cementation surface. So in this study, group A would give you the best because it's the one which has the most wall intact. And restorative space ability is another consideration, but we must always make sure that, of course, we may be limited by height. You may have little restorative space, and the lab is going to be stuck with that because they need to give space for the abutment, then the metal, then the ceramic, and of course, a little bit of space for the cement. But do not make sure that they don't over taper your abutment. So the one on the left is very over tapered. The next one is not so tapered. And if you look at it, the short, extremely tapered abutments have the worst results. They do not have the best retention with whatever kind of cement you use, but it gives you the same problem because mechanically there's no retention. You can't expect the cement to do all the work. And in this particular case, with our friend who keeps coming in every now and then, what we realized is by sandblasting or air particle abrading those abutments, we have actually kept these in for much longer because the cement doesn't wash out as easily, or it bonds a little bit better. So that has given us a much better result. And always this is spoken about, passivity, passivity, passivity. And they always say that, oh, cementable bridges would be easier to obtain passivity just by virtue of the fact that it has a space for cement, and so it will give you a little bit of play, and so you can get a passive restoration, which is not possible in screw retained restoration. I beg to differ. If you go through the protocols, I think you can get very passive screw retained restorations. And this is a study which compared abutment level, closed tray, full plastic UCLAs, open tray impressions, casted to gold cylinders, bonded to gold cylinders, similar to a tie base these days. But they basically found no difference in terms of passivity between any of these. And for screw retained, if you have a full arch case like this and you have all of these impression copings sticking out, you should join them with patterned resin, or you could use Bredent's material, which is called Q resin, which also works fine. And once you join them, you want to section them as soon as they set. The reason to do that is because acrylic has shrinkage. And if you connect such a big bridge of acrylic, there's about 7% shrinkage that you're dealing with. And as soon as you take out this impression, all of this is going to sort of want to collapse towards each other because of the shrinkage inherent in the acrylic. So instead, you need to section it, reconnect it, and now the amount of acrylic shrinking is going to be only those little areas which you reconnected. So that really works well in giving me passive restorations. And you could do the Sheffield test. Once the lab sends it back to you, you seat it on the model, you turn one screw at one end of it, and if it's lifting up on the other end, you know you're not passive. At that point, you need to section and solder your restoration so that you can get a passive fit. And sometimes it's very hard to do these long full arch restorations and get passivity. So one of the things you can do is break it up right in the middle, and then you can get passivity in this way as well, because you're not dealing with one whole section and 6 implants. You're dealing with just two sections and 3 implants. So that works better. The screw resistance test, when you're tightening the screw, this is the order which you should ideally tighten. You start from 1 here, 2, then you go to the premolars, and then you finally go to the molars. This will give you an idea of passivity as well, because many people have a sort of habit of starting from one end and going to the other. But by over tightening on one end, you may compromise your fit on the other end. But if your restoration was truly passive, maybe you wouldn't have those issues. But this is a good way to tighten your restorations. And we have to remember, even though I like screw retained restorations, they are very technique sensitive. So for this guy, he didn't really care. It was far in the back. But you can see the screw access hole emerging from the buckle over here. And that's been closed by composite. He never noticed. He probably never will notice. But for this gentleman over here who has the screw access hole on the buckle, because he chose PAN, there's a good chance that this is going to discolor, and one day he's going to come back and say, hey, why does this look so yellow in the back over there? He's going to say your implant looks yellow, even though that has nothing to do with it. So thankfully, multi-unit abutments exist. They are straight or they are angulated. And especially in these all-on-4 cases, they are very, very useful to redirect the angulation of the implant and give us the access hole straight through the occlusal, which makes life really easy, really comfortable, looks really aesthetic, nice and retrievable, and that's the way we like it. Nobel Biocare has the angulated screw channel, and Bredent has these lateral screws, both of which work really well. This is a case by Dr. Rattan from the FOR website. This is a fantastic case. This patient is edentulous. They place the implants. There's your open tray copings. Now they're designing the angulated screw channel. And what that means is, even though the implant's trajectory is in this way coming out, they are able to direct the screw channel inwards so that it's a traditional screw retained restoration. So in this case, it's a zirconia abutment, and that's layered on top with ceramic, and you can see how the angle of the screwdriver is. So it's a special screwdriver, it's a special system. Now other companies are able to implement it. It's not just Nobel Biocare, but it's a great way to deal with these problems.
So, why is this lady looking so angry? She looks like she's upset. I mean, she's smoking at the ears. She's letting out steam. And what is her concern? Her concern is that she doesn't want to accept she doesn't like the ugly screw access hole. And she says, look at how bad it looks. I'm so disappointed. I paid such a lot of money, and still you're going to give me a result like this. So how do we solve? We have such kinds of patients. Some don't care at all, but then you have the odd patient who is very, very finicky. And to these people, right from the beginning, I think it is worth suggesting them to do it differently, not to do the standard procedure, but probably go in for a completely a zirconia crown so that you don't, once you have a zirconia, there's no metallic screw access to do. So you can have a full contour zirconia on the occlusal, and if ceramic is used on the occlusal surface, it would even look even better. So you cannot see where is the screw access hole. And this is how we now have to actually understand the mindset of our patients before we suggest them, a standard a PFM or a zirconia or whatever it is, depending on how they seem to appear with their preferences. Or you take this case, this patient has a nice smile, screw retained, no issues, right? But if you look further and look at the thing, you will see that one secret is there, and that is number 1-3, the canine on the right, is a cemented crown, while the rest is screw retained. If you look closely, you can see the line of cementation also. Fortunately, she did not notice it, but the important thing to remember here, in these unique situations, it is to make sure you save these photos in your records so that you can remember what to do in the future in case there is any screw loosening or decementation. Or take the case of this gentleman. He was very happy with his smile. He's been with us for 5-6 years, but he came to us where this all-on-4 was done. At that time, there was no digital planning. The patient came in with all these screw access hole right on, ending up on the labium. We could not angulate the teeth any more than this because that would ruin his looks. And we had to deal with these access holes which were all coming out on the labium. So what to do in this situation? Luckily, the prosthodontist, Dr. Varun, helped me solve this problem. And this is what he did. He put, what was it you did, Dr. Varun? I think he placed a...
Yeah, these were veneers which were cemented on top of them.
Yeah. He veneered the surfaces and covered the area, and so that was fine. But in such situations, our hands are tied. We do all-on-4, we talk a lot about it. Sometimes the screw opening comes out in places where you don't want it to come, and then we have to figure out what to do and how to fix the problem. That's the problem with the screw. It is very unforgivable in that way.
Yeah, and I think this patient especially, I'm worried because now I don't have access to these screw holes. I only have these photographs. So if he ever comes back with this screw retained bridge and it's loose and I need to tighten something, then I essentially need to destroy those Emax veneers and do it again. So it's not as simple as just taking out a composite hole. So screw retained does have its issues, of course. So let's look at evidence, and now that we have spoken about screw retained, cement retained, let's look at where we are. And I'll just turn on my camera again. There we go. So we have this paper, which is a fantastic paper. It's a 10-year randomized control trial. They compared cement retained and screw retained restorations, and it was on the same patient, which is brilliant, right? The left side had cement retained or screw retained, and the right side had the other thing. And they looked at the patient 10 years later to see whether this intervention made a difference. And what really happened was this intervention, they concluded, didn't really make a difference because in terms of the amount of gingiva remaining, it was almost the same for both. And the marginal bone resorption was also basically the same for cement retained or screw retained. So in terms of overall success, because that's really the only paper with the same patient in the same mouth, one design versus another design, that's a great piece of evidence. So I would say overall success, we give 1-1 for each. In terms of complications, there are 23 cohort studies and one randomized trial in the systematic review. They looked at ceramic chipping, they looked at implant failure, and they looked at screw loosening. And they finally concluded that cement retained and screw retained are the same. They were not able to find a difference between both of these. In terms of screw loosening, actually, in single tooth, on the early days of doing screw retained crowns versus a single cement retained crown, there was much more screw loosening in single tooth implants. And there's less than 5% for the cement retained situations. But these days, things have improved because implant connections are so much better. The screws we use are so much better. And the torque wrenches have also become a lot better. Whichever company you're looking at, they have very, very standard torque wrenches. So that's not an issue as well. So even in terms of screw loosening, I have to give a score of 1-1 for both groups. Marginal opening. This is something which really screw retained looks like it would probably win because the marginal opening or the micro gap in screw retained is much, much less, almost 8 times less than when you're cementing with zinc phosphate or glass ionomer or whatever cement you want to use. You're going to have some amount of marginal opening. But the important thing to remember is there was no difference in bacteria whether the marginal opening was 8 microns or 64 microns. And even if you have misfit, there is no real evidence to show that misfit causes bone loss. Misfitting implant prosthesis, if it's screw retained, can cause screw loosening, but it's not going to cause bone loss. So even in terms of micro leakage, it's the same score for both. Passivity, we spoke about this. It's easier to achieve in cement retained, but remember, if you're accurate with screw retained, there's no difference. And remember that cement retained may be too passive. The lab tech may say, hey, I don't want to go through all this trouble of making this thing passive and fitting properly. Let me just blow it wide open so that it just drops in, but that means it's also going to drop out really easily. So too passive is also a problem. So score 1 for each of them. And finally, ease of fabrication and cost. Yes, cement retained may be cheaper. Why? Because you can tell your lab, listen, you can put a stock abutment, shape it however you want, and you can tell your lab that it's a tooth. You can lie to them and say it's a tooth. And then they're going to charge you the price for a tooth and not the price for a crown. So you've avoided the fixture level impression, you've avoided the, all of the complications involved with taking those complicated impressions. But then realize that at the end of the day, your big molar crown is going to sit on this tiny little stock abutment which you have adjusted, and it's probably going to last there for maybe a year or two before it needs to be replaced. At this point, you're going to scratch your head and say, I wish I had done a custom abutment and cementable if you're part of Team Cemented. Or you may even say, hey, I should have done screw retain. But then at that point, if you're doing a custom abutment or screw retain, your lab costs have gone up because now you're taking your fixture level impression. You're doing all of the work which you honestly should have done from the very beginning. And you can see the difference in how a custom abutment supports the tissue versus a stock abutment, which is one size fits all, but really fits nobody. So that's the big difference. So the scoreboard at the end of the day is tied. The cement retained and screw retained group both have their advantages, both have applications. There are sometimes for aesthetics you cannot do screw retained. There's sometimes space issues where you cannot do cement retained, and you have a lot of these issues. So you have to be very, very careful about your choice and make sure that you're choosing the right thing. But in terms of our debate, we can only conclude it in a draw. We cannot really say that this one is better than the other. And that's an important lesson to learn. You do not want to be the clinician that says, I only do screw retained or I only do cement retained. You should be flexible. You should be adaptable to doing whatever solution is going to work out best for you. And remember the 4 E's. You have evidence, you have experience, you have aesthetics, and execution. These are the 4 factors which you need to decide what system of retention you're going to use. And that's how you will not make a mistake on your cases if you keep these 4 E's in mind. And both of us can be contacted at any time on Facebook, on Instagram, through our website, whatever you like. And we both would like to thank all of you all for your kind attention.
Thank you so much, both of you. It was really very informative session. And the best part, what I liked about was, instead of debating which design is better, you both gave solutions on how to overcome the shortcomings of each design. So let's take some question and answers. So my first question is, what are your thoughts about screw-mentable prosthesis? So ma'am, can you give?
Yeah, we have been using screw-mentable quite a bit in our clinic. Because now we are both equally divided, which is, so we want to have the best of both worlds. So essentially it's a crown, it's a screw, and it's an abutment. That's a screw-mentable one. That is main thing is the crown is attached to the abutment before you screw it in. That's about all that is. And what do you do by that? By doing that, you avoid cement altogether. So you have the best of both worlds. So we really like screw-mentable whenever it's possible. We like to do that earlier and use these crowns, and they're wonderful.
Yeah, you basically avoid the cement in the mouth. Right. Because all the cementation stuff is now taken to the lab. So it's really a nice thing. And I think because of zirconia, we're really headed there to do a majority of cases with these screw-mentable designs.
We do quite a bit of those.
So in this design, what do you do? Do you fix it up on the cast and then place the entire thing, or you place it in the mouth, cement it in the mouth and then remove it again, remove the excess cement? What do you do?
No, that's a great question. A lot of people like to do the cementing in the mouth. I don't like to do that because then I have to control for saliva. I have to make sure everything is nice and bone dry. I'm not a fan of that. I like to take a nice fixture level impression. I like to send it to my lab. They are going to cement this in a completely dry environment. They're going to use a high power light curing unit and get the resin cement set. And debonding issues, out of I don't know how many crowns I've done with this design, I think I've had a debonding issue with one of them. So it's very, very rare to have a problem when the lab handles it for you. But the flip side is, if it comes to you and it's already bonded in the screw-mentable form, and now you're checking the contacts and the contacts are open, and you need to do an addition, then it has to go back to the lab. They need to do a firing. Then they need to remove that crown. They need to re-add the ceramic, and then they need to glue it back together. So it's really a big nightmare when that happens.
Okay. And what about the occlusion? So will there be any difference in the occlusion if you cement it on the cast?
So
will it affect the occlusion?
No, if you're accurate, you're fine.
Okay.
You need to be accurate with your impressions. You need to be accurate with everything. Then you should be fine.
Okay. And what material do you use to fill the access hole, be it screw-mentable or be it screw design?
So actually what we do is we use Teflon. We like Teflon very much. In the olden days, we used many things. We used to put little pellets of cotton. Then we put little tubing, small little tubes, rubber tubes available, tiny little stops inside. But nothing works as well as Teflon. So now we just bunch Teflon in, and then we put composite resin on the top and seal it.
Okay. This question is for you, Dr. Varun. So if we don't get passive fit with screw retain prosthesis in case of if the implant is angulated, then what is the solution for that?
So if it is an error with the impression, then you would have to section your framework and you have to reconnect it, and then you get it soldered in the lab, and then you try it back in the mouth and hopefully it should fit. But if the implants are so angulated that there's no way you can get parallelism to get a passive fit, then it's a good chance to use a multi-unit abutment. You use a multi-unit abutment on one of those implants, change the angulation, and then you have less of a problem.
And the solder joints that you are saying, are they really good? They do have good strength?
They're good because they're now doing this with laser welding.
Okay.
So you're not using a foreign material. You have your two edges, and then you don't have a third metal joint.
Metal, right.
But it's welding. So it's the same metal which is used to join both. And it's done in a very fine detail. So it works fine. I've not had a solder joint or a laser weld joint break ever.
Okay. The next question to you, ma'am. Which cement do you advise to use for luting the cementable crowns?
Yeah, this is a good question, because we have, the favorite is the temp bond, which you use. You like as far, it all depends. You see, it depends on how is that crown actually fitting. If the internal fit is good, if the resistance is good, and it has got its own natural fit, for instance, you do not like to use a very strong cement. There's no necessity. So you start at the bottom of the ladder. So very often, especially full arch cases which we are doing, we like to use temp bond because, in case anything happens, it's a little easier to remove it. If it's a single crown, one thing, if you use zinc phosphate is an all-time favorite, for instance, but it dissolves in the mouth. So slowly the cement will start leaching out, and you have to have a very dry environment to put it in. And once you put it in, if anything happens, removing that, removing a crown which has been cemented with zinc phosphate cement is quite a nightmare. Sometimes we have to even cut through it. So we kind of play it safely for every case. So if it's a single tooth, we don't mind. For zirconia crowns, we will use a resin cement if it's a single one.
Okay.
If it's a full arch, you'll give a temp bond. So if patients come back when it gets slightly loose, they don't wait for it to actually drop out. They immediately sense it. So they come and we just gently tap it out, clean it up and put it. But we have a sense of relief because we're able to take out the prosthesis without
True.
Yeah.
Yes.
But if they come back every 4 months and say, oh, it's getting loose, it's getting loose, then we'll reluctantly go to the next step.
Okay.
Sometimes we even mix zinc phosphate with a little Vaseline. Something like that.
Okay.
Slowly we climb up that to the hardness of the cement ladder. Finally, we get fed up sometimes. Okay, now we'll put resin cement. So you have to play it by ear depending on the case.
Right. Okay, ma'am. Okay, this question to you, Dr. Varun. So, what should be the torque with which you will screw the prosthesis? What torque should be used?
So that is all dependent on the company. That is not our choice, and I really recommend that we do not exceed the values recommended by the company. More torque is not good. So, like for example, BioHorizons tell you it's 30 Newton centimeters. Don't talk to 35 saying like, nothing will happen to the implant because they told me the implant strength can go up to like 100 Newton centimeters. What ends up happening is you now end up overstretching your screw and you're not really going to get that actual torque value that you need. So you are sort of compromising yourself if you do that. So stick to the company recommended torque values. It's usually 30 to 35, around that range.
Okay. And can you explain the screw settling effect, what exactly it is and how do we overcome that?
Yeah, so the screw settling effect is, once you tighten the screw, and you've delivered something called preload to the screw. And the preload is what is the clamping force which holds the abutment or the crown to the implant. But now, given some time, and this happens actually very fast, the screw sort of settles and then you may have a loss of preload. So one of the things that used to be done with gold screws, because gold screws stretch, is they would tighten it and then they would tighten it again, and that is now sort of elongated the screw, and that's all part of the settling effect of the screw.
Okay. This question to you, ma'am. So in case of screw fracture, what tools do you recommend to retrieve it?
Well, there are retrieval screws from Neo Biotech. It's all very laborious. We really haven't found, I have yet to find the perfect retrieval screw. I don't know if Dr. Varun has found anything in this.
I think actually, the paper which you showed with the slot driver, that one is actually a very good one. So if you have a broken screw, you take a fine diamond and you make a little line, like a notch on top of the broken screw, put the slot driver. It looks like a flat screwdriver. Put it in and slowly unscrew it and you're done.
We have done this in the past, but it has taken a year. It has taken an hour and a half.
Yeah, you have to cancel your patients for the day.
Right.
Absolutely difficult. I'm not there's no quick fix for this.
Yeah.
So you were successful in every case to retrieve it?
Yeah, I think there's never been a case which you have not been able to retrieve it. Luckily, fracture is something we see very, very less because we control the occlusion.
Oh, actually, Dr. Varun, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I've had in all these I started in 90. Yeah, in all these 22 years, I had one case where I just couldn't remove it. And we got so desperate, we put this diamond burr inside, we tried to remove it. That time there were no retrieval instruments. Then you know what we did? We abandoned the implant.
Yes,
We just went next door. Adjacent to that, we told the patient we can't do anything. And we just, instead of trying to, sort of refine it out or do something, we just told the patient, we'll just put another implant next door. We just found some good bone and did that. But that was only one case in 22 years.
Okay. This question to you, ma'am, again. So, what is your take on third-party abutment? Is there any difference at the implant abutment junction as compared to the original abutment? And do you use those abutments?
Yeah, actually, I'm a very traditional kind of person, and I don't like to change. I don't like to change company parts. To put it very bluntly, in the sense like, suppose I like to use it from the same company because I feel if anything goes wrong, the support will come from the company. And if I go to some random thing and if it doesn't work or something happens, then nobody takes responsibility. So just for the little bit of money that you might save, you might end up endangering further because it may not fit as exactly. It's quite like car spare parts and all these other things. It works in the same way. One, there is goodwill. Secondly, that little extra thing is well worth it because you have perfectly fitting components. So I never use third party.
Okay. Dr. Varun, you showed a case of Emax veneer you used to cover the access hole. Dr. Varun, you are there? Yeah. Okay. So how did you bond the Emax veneer on top of the access hole? What was the protocol?
For that particular case, I believed I used just U200, and I did some. I don't remember, but if I had used U200, I would have directly bonded it on. And if I had used like a Variolink or a multi-link, that type of thing, I would have done hydrofluoric acid etching. I would have done all of that steps, silane and all of that to get it bonded. I don't remember. It's been a while on that case. Okay. But yeah, everything, the preparation depends on the cement.
Okay.
Depending
So
on-
you just covered only the whole or the entire labial surface you had covered with the veneer?
So it was the entire labial surface.
Okay. Next question to you, ma'am. In case of limited mouth opening, which prosthesis should we do? Which design is preferable?
So, this is a kind of, it's like a two-way question. Like limited mouth opening would also mean less interocclusal space. If the limited mouth opening is combined with less interocclusal space, then of course the screw retain will work. If there is limited mouth opening is because you just can't reach it and it's a little bit more than that, then the cemented is actually much easier.
Right.
Typically, I would reach for cemented because just to get your hand in or put your finger in or put an instrument in is going to be so difficult. At the same time, interocclusal space is also very important.
So with respect to access, we will have better access in cement retained prosthesis.
Yeah.
Okay. This question to you, Dr. Varun. So for cantilever prosthesis, which one is better?
Generally, cantilevers are done on screw retained. I don't think evidence shows you whether cementable or screw retained is better for cantilever prosthesis. There's no conclusive study on that. But you need to follow some basic rules like don't cantilever too back, don't cantilever on short implants, splint multiple implants if you're cantilevering. AP spread is a concept which, it's a little bit controversial, but it's a guide on how to actually decide how far to cantilever. Whether you cement or do screw retention on your cantilevers, it's a little bit of a controversial topic to say that one is better than the other. So I can't give you a straight answer for that.
But does cantilever portion cause more screw loosening?
Yeah, you can see more screw loosening with cantilevers.
Okay.
Definitely.
So in case of repeatable screw loosening, so how do you decide whether to just tighten that screw or we have to replace it with new screw?
I think, if it happens once, randomly 3 years down the line, some screw is loosened, you just tighten the same screw. You can always visually examine it and see if the screw is damaged in any way or there's something wrong with the screw. Or if you use the third-party screw, definitely use the original company screw at that point.
Okay.
Or if you see some damage, of course, you want to change it. But I would say tighten it once, maybe tighten it twice. But then if you keep tightening it every time the patient comes in, the patient's going to get irritated. And I don't think at that point it may be to do with the screw also. It may be to do with the misfit of the prosthesis which is causing the loosening. I think that may be what needs to be looked at that point.
Okay. Ma'am, what instrument do you advise to remove the excess cement? What material instrument should we use?
Actually, I don't like to use any instrument as far as I don't like to leave cement. But if at all I have to do something, then I probably would use a very fine curette and very gently get under, like a scaler, but a very, very fine scaler under that, with a hand scaler, not the ultrasonic.
But plastic or like what?
Plastic actually doesn't help much. It doesn't do anything.
Mm-hmm.
So I like to use a very fine, very carefully try to remove that.
Okay.
But it is with hand scaling method, not with the ultrasonic or anything like that.
Okay. Dr. Varun, can we give all ceramic crowns with a screw retained design?
Yeah, absolutely. We do it all the time, but we do it with zirconia. Mm-hmm. If you want to do it with Emax, you would do it. So the same thing, the tie base, you would use the titanium base, and on top of that, you would either do your luting with an Emax crown or you do it with a zirconia crown, whatever you like. But that there is no all ceramic in terms of the abutment connection to the implant.
Right.
That has to be titanium because they've shown a lot of problems with zirconia having the connection. So it's always all ceramic with a little asterisk on top which says connection is titanium, but the rest of it can be zirconia or Emax.
So this is like your screw-mountable crowns.
It basically becomes screw-mountable.
Yeah, it becomes the same.
Yeah. Okay. Now there are more questions from the viewers. So Dr. Saurabh Biswas, he is asking, how do you understand whether cement is stuck or not?
Well, you can see that from an X-ray. That's what I say. It's a question of, like you remove as much cement as you can, but in the final analysis, it's always good when we finish cementing a crown, you like to take an X-ray. It's a good idea because at least you can see the cement in the proximal. You may not be able to see the cement in the lake. So that's why you have to take all precautions to see that as far as possible, whatever we mentioned, do all those steps to ensure that the cement hasn't gone beyond where it should be. But it's well worth taking an X-ray. It's well worth.
Okay. This question is from Dr. Sudeep Kumar. He is asking which is the best in anterior region?
Best what?
Best design.
You mean screw versus
Best,
cement?
yes, best prosthesis.
Well,
design.
it's the angulation of the implant is what
Yeah, it depends.
So if the angulation is ideal, we would prefer to do a screw retain so that we can retrieve it in the future. But if the angulation is not ideal, you may have to do a custom abutment and a cement retain case. But preferably, we would prefer screw retain.
Sometimes, for instance, a very small lateral incisor is very difficult to accommodate the screw and this and that. So we like to make a cementable one, and if the aesthetics looks very nice. So it becomes very clumsy when you have a small little space into which you have to do a screw retain crown.
Right.
That's my experience.
I would argue on the other side, it becomes very clumsy to do a cement retain crown with a very small space.
That's
For
a
me, that's
opinion.
But
Okay.
it's operator dependent, right? So some people
Right.
prefer one or the other.
This question is from Dr. Vishal Poras. He is asking in cement retained, if loosening happens, can we give hole in zirconia by burr for tightening the screw?
Technically, you can. You may run into issues because once you start drilling into zirconia, you are going to do something called crack initiation. And that crack initiation is going to become crack propagation. And once the crack propagates, it's going to actually fracture. So you would be very, very lucky if you were able to drill through a zirconia cemented crown and able to convert it into a screw retain. Consider yourself to be a very, very lucky person. Most likely when you try this, you are going to fracture the crown. So don't be surprised if that happens.
I think it's better to do pre-planning and see exactly where is a screw access hole and do all the steps we have mentioned to know exactly where it is. Maybe then there'll be less chances of breaking that zirconia when you try to come through.
I would have my heart in my mouth when I'm doing this particular operation. I would not be happy at all.
And coming on to the last question now. So any case where there is absolute indication that only screw retain can be used, or an absolute indication where only cement retain can be used? Any case?
Very little restorative space, like about 5 millimeters, you have to do screw retain because the cement retain is going to come out. But as Dr. Acharya said, you may end up with a very ugly looking crown because you don't have much space. Absolute cement retain is basically based on patient aesthetics. She had a case the other day and the patient said, we spoke to them, we showed them what the screw access hole was all about. And it was somewhere, I think it was somewhere in the posterior region, but she said, no, I don't want to see that. We kind of sensed that this patient is going to be particular about it. So we said, okay, fine. So we ended up doing a cementable case for that situation.
Okay.
Patients are difficult. They want to avoid grafting. They want the implant in the perfect
right.
place. They don't want the screw access hole to come through. Like, there are all these challenges which we face. So
agree. Yeah. Thank you so much for the wonderful session. Over to you, sir. Sir, you are mute.
I'll just unmute. Yeah. Thanks, Dr. Acharya. Thanks, Varun.
Thank you so much.
Wonderful session, and you all have made an excellent combination as you did in the Family show. Once again, thanks so much for this informative and insightful session. Thank you, viewers, for joining us on this late evening on Saturday and spending time with us on your weekend. Have a good weekend. We'll come back with some more sessions next week and we'll keep you posted. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Doctor.
Bye-bye.
Bye.